I was the accident, the weird little scribbler in a house full of scholars. My name's Lila. I'm 27 now, but back then, I was just the youngest kid in a very serious family. We lived in Evanston, Illinois, a leafy university town where my dad was a tenured physics professor and my mom taught molecular biology. My 4 older siblings, Elliot, Daniel, Sandra, and Victor, were all carbon copies of our parents. Math competitions, science fairs, perfect test scores. Our dinner conversations sounded like TED Talks. I didn't fit. When I was 7, I drew a sketch of my mom and taped it to the fridge. She smiled and said, "Very creative, honey," then added, "Try drawing with more proportions next time." I didn't know what that meant, but I remember Elliot snickering from the hallway. By the time I was 10, I'd learned not to expect much. Still, I adored them. I used to follow Elliot around with my sketchbook, trying to show him pages of cartoons I made. He'd skim it politely, nod, and say, "You should try doing something useful with your time." He was 17 then, already accepted into some fancy overseas program in the UK. Sandra left for Harvard when I was 8. She gave me a hug at the airport and said, "Keep being artistic, Lila. It adds flavor to the family." Then she walked off like she hadn't just called me a spice rack. I spent most of my childhood trying to impress people who didn't think I belonged. I'd hold up my ribbons from school art shows at the dinner table, only to get mild claps before the conversation turned back to Daniel's new publication or Victor's research assistant gig. The first real gut punch came when I was 11. Elliot was graduating from Oxford with some kind of distinction in bioengineering. My parents flew to London for the reception, and I thought I was going too. I helped Mom pick out a gift, even made a little handmade card with calligraphy I'd practiced for weeks. The day before their flight, I asked what time we were leaving. Dad looked up from his laptop and said, "Oh, sweetheart, it's faculty only." Elliot said it's not really appropriate for kids. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. I stood at the front door the next morning as they loaded the cab, holding the card and a scarf I had crocheted for Elliot. Sandra had once told me he got cold easily in the UK. I remember Mom giving me an apologetic smile. "We'll give it to him for you, okay?" I nodded, heart thudding. "Tell him I said congratulations." Of course. They didn't mention me in any of the photos. I only knew because I found them later on Sandra's Facebook, filled with glowing captions and clinking wine glasses. My scarf never showed up. That was the first time I understood I wasn't really part of their world. I was just the colorful background to their spotlight. I was 13 when it happened again. Sandra was presenting her international thesis at a university conference in Montreal, something about neural language mapping. I didn't understand most of it, but I was proud anyway. She was the only woman under 30 in her research cohort, and I thought that was amazing. I spent 2 weeks designing a sketch of her standing at a podium, her hair in that twisted braid she always wore, neurons bursting like fireworks behind her. I even added little details from photos I'd seen on her website, her heels, her notebook, the little chain she wore on her wrist. I showed the drawing to Mom on a Friday night, hoping she'd include it in the suitcase as a surprise. She looked up from her tea and smiled, kind of. "This is sweet, honey. But Sandra's presentation isn't really a place for kids." I blinked. "Wait, I'm not going." Dad looked up from the newspaper. "It's not that you're not wanted, Lila. It's just, the event's academic. You wouldn't get much out of it. You took Daniel when he was 13 to Victor's lab conference." Mom gently put her hand over mine. "That was different." "How?" She hesitated. "You'll understand when you're older." That phrase again. It was the same one they used when Elliot left me behind. And now it felt like a stamp. Not ready, not needed, not enough. I tried to smile. I just wanted to support her. Mom gave me a look like I was being difficult. "Sandra knows you love her." That was the end of it. They left the next morning without me. I watched them from the window as they backed out of the driveway, luggage in the trunk, my drawing still tucked on the coffee table. No one ever packed it. That week, while they were gone, I entered a local art contest at the community center. Theme was visionaries. I submitted my sketch of Sandra. 2 weeks later, I got first place. The judges said it was emotionally detailed and startlingly mature. They shook my hand and gave me a little medal. I walked home holding the certificate like it meant something. When I showed Mom, she smiled, distracted. "That's great, sweetheart. Can you take the chicken out of the freezer?" I hung the certificate on my bedroom door. No one noticed. Not even when Sandra came back and I handed her a copy of the winning sketch. She nodded vaguely and said, "Cute. You captured my ears weirdly, though." That night, I started a journal. I wrote, "I feel like the waitress at a genius family dinner. I bring out little things I make, hoping someone's hungry for what I do. But no one ever is." From then on, I stopped trying to be invited. I just tried to be noticed. I entered every city art contest I could find. I won 3. I placed in 4. I stopped announcing them. No one asked. I was 16 when I got into the Westland Art Conservatory. It was a long shot. They only took 20 students a year. My portfolio was a mess of portraits and collage pieces I'd made in the garage under a broken ceiling fan. But somehow, it worked. The acceptance letter came in a thick, white envelope, and I screamed when I opened it. My mom blinked at me from across the kitchen table. "That's good, right?" she asked. "It's huge," I said, trying not to shake. "It's one of the top programs on the East Coast." She gave me a small smile and reached for the dish rag. "Well, I'm sure it'll be a unique experience." That was it. I texted Victor, hoping he'd say something. He was being honored with a symposium in D.C. for his work in computational biology, and I figured maybe, finally, we could share some kind of milestone. I asked if I could come to his event. His response came a day later. "It's for academic professionals, not doodlers." Doodlers. I stared at the screen, my face burning. I waited until dinner to say something. My parents were at the table, half listening while reading articles on their tablets. "I want to go to Victor's symposium," I said. Mom glanced up. "Lila, it's really not." I got into Westland, I interrupted. "They published one of my pieces in their spring issue. It's not just doodling. I deserve to be there." Dad sighed. "You can't force your way into everything, sweetheart." "I'm not forcing anything," I said, my voice rising. "I'm asking to be treated like I matter." Victor chose that exact moment to walk in from the den. "You don't belong at an academic event," he said without looking at me. "Don't make this dramatic." "I'm not dramatic, I'm exhausted," I snapped. "You treat me like I'm some mascot for the family, like I'm only welcome if I sit quietly and applaud." "You embarrassed yourself when you sent that email to the symposium director," he said flatly. My stomach dropped. "You showed them my email?" Victor shrugged. "I wanted to make sure there weren't any misunderstandings. That was when I lost it." "Do you hear yourself?" I said, standing up. "You humiliated me on purpose. You act like being an artist makes me a burden." "You are a burden," he said calmly. "You just don't realize it." I don't remember what I screamed after that. I just remember my mother's face going white and my dad shouting something about tone. I was grounded for 6 months for screaming like a lunatic and making the family look unstable. During that time, I missed Thanksgiving, my cousin's wedding, and 3 conservatory mixers. I spent most of it drawing in silence and avoiding everyone. That was when it finally clicked. I could get published in every magazine in the country and they'd still see a doodler. I stopped showing them anything after that. They had made it clear I wasn't one of them. And I was done begging to be. I met Jonas on a Thursday night at a local gallery tucked behind a laundromat. He was standing in front of my piece, an abstract charcoal sketch called Familiar Cold. Most people passed it without a glance. Jonas stood there for 5 minutes, quietly absorbing it like he was listening to it speak. I pretended to check my phone nearby, pretending not to care. "You made this?" he asked finally, turning toward me. "Yeah," I said, bracing for polite praise or shallow questions. But he smiled. "It feels like isolation dressed up in control." That caught me off guard. I blinked. "That's exactly what it is." We talked until the gallery closed. He told me he was a software developer, not much of an artist, but he liked things that made people feel something. He was calm, not awkward calm, but the kind of calm that feels safe to stand next to. By our 4th date, we were eating takeout on his living room floor. I told him about my family in the vaguest terms. For brilliant siblings, academic royalty, parents who always seemed vaguely confused by me. I expected him to nod and move on. Instead, he asked, "How do they treat you now?" I shrugged. "Like an unpaid intern at their Nobel banquet. If I stay quiet, I'm tolerated." He frowned. "Lila, that's awful." I laughed nervously. "It's not like they were abusive or anything. They just didn't see me." "No," he said. "That matters. Being invisible still hurts." It was the first time anyone validated that out loud. He didn't pity me. He was just angry on my behalf. and that alone unraveled something I didn't know I'd been holding tight. Over the next 2 years, he saw me through everything. My first professional gallery show. The day I got rejected by a grant committee and cried in the stairwell. The awkward holiday dinners I chose to skip. When he proposed, it was in our tiny kitchen, over burnt pancakes and bad coffee. I said yes before he even finished asking. The moment the ring was on my finger, I knew one thing for sure. This wedding would not be for them. It wouldn't be a silent plea for validation or a show of accomplishment. It would be ours, messy, joyful, and completely real. That night, we sat on the couch with my laptop. I opened a spreadsheet and titled it Guest List. Jonas leaned over and kissed the top of my head. Anyone who made you feel small, he said gently. They don't get a seat. I looked at the blank cells on the screen. No Elliot. No Daniel. No Sandra. No Victor. Not even my parents. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 2 months before the wedding, my phone rang. It was my mother. She never called without texting first, so I knew something was coming. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice sweet but tight. "Just wondering, when are the wedding invites going out? We haven't received ours yet." I stood in the kitchen, watching the kettle steam. "They've already gone out." A pause. Then her voice sharpened. "You mean, we didn't get one?" "No," I said calmly. "You didn't." Silence. Then, "Lila, that can't be right." "It is," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "You're not invited." The explosion came fast. "Are you serious right now? You're excluding your own family? Do you know how that makes us look?" I didn't flinch. "About as bad as it looked when you excluded me from 4 of theirs." "That was different," she snapped. "You were younger. You didn't understand the context." "I understand now," I said, voice steady. "I remember all of it. You're being cruel." I took a deep breath. "You left me out of Elliot's reception because I was a kid. Sandra's presentation because it wasn't appropriate. Victor's symposium because I embarrassed the family. And all the times in between when I was treated like a cute distraction at best. So no, I'm not inviting people who never saw me as enough." She tried a different tactic. "Honey, weddings are about bringing families together. Don't punish us just because you feel." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself." She went quiet. Then, in a tone I knew too well, she added, "Your father will be devastated." I said nothing. "He's already started writing his toast." I stared at the sink. "Then he can give it at one of the conferences you all actually care about." Click. That night, the family group chat lit up. Daniel posted a vague quote about forgiveness. Sandra sent a thumbs-down emoji to one of my wedding photos. Victor chimed in with, "You've made your point, Lila. Now grow up." No one asked why. No one apologized. I muted the chat. Jonas came home with takeout and found me sitting on the couch, scrolling through the messages. "They're spiraling," I said. He glanced at my phone, then kissed my forehead. "They're not mad about missing the wedding. They're mad you finally took your power back." I nodded. For so long, I'd fantasized about hearing one of them say they were proud, or sorry, or even just curious about who I was outside of their world. But they never were. And now? Now they didn't get to sit at my table. Not for the cake. Not for the vows. Not for the version of me they never wanted to see. This wedding wasn't theirs to ruin. It never had been. The backlash came fast and loud. Victor was the first. A single-sentence text. "This wedding stunt is beneath you." Then Daniel chimed in. "Family is complicated, Lila. But this is just vindictive." Sandra sent me a PDF attachment of an article titled "Forgiveness as Maturity." No message. Just that. I read each message in silence, my chest tight, but my hands steady. Jonas watched from the couch as I tossed my phone onto the coffee table. "You okay?" he asked. "I expected it," I said. "Just not all at once." By the end of the day, I'd gotten 12 messages, 4 missed calls, and 2 snide comments on my art page from anonymous accounts that I knew, without doubt, were family. One said, "Funny how bitterness disguises itself as boundaries." I didn't respond. The next evening, it escalated. I was setting dinner plates when there was a knock. Jonas checked the peephole, then looked back at me. "It's your parents." I froze. "Don't open it." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" I nodded. But they knocked again, louder this time. My dad's voice filtered through the door. "Lila, we just want to talk." Jonas stayed beside me as I opened the door halfway. My mom started in immediately. "What are you doing? This is not how a daughter treats her family." "I already explained," I said. No, she snapped, stepping forward. I blocked the doorway. You're overreacting. You're not a child anymore. That word again, child. Always used to erase the hurt they caused me when I was 1. I snapped. I was a child when you all left me out, remember? When you told me I wasn't mature enough for Elliot's graduation, or smart enough for Sandra's presentation, or professional enough for Victor's event. And now I finally say no, and suddenly I'm immature again? My dad tried to speak, but I kept going. I begged you to see me, to acknowledge my wins. And you didn't. You all made it perfectly clear where I stood in this family. You're being dramatic, Mom said, eyes wide with disbelief. No, I said. I'm being done. Then I stepped back and closed the door in their faces. Jonas wrapped an arm around me. That was brave. It felt like breathing, I whispered. That night, I muted every family thread. The pings kept coming, but they stopped meaning anything. The guilt they tried to hand me, I didn't pick it up. Not this time. I woke up before the alarm. The sky outside was soft and gray, the kind of calm that felt like a held breath. My heart thudded in that jittery, excited way you get before something you've waited years for. For the first few seconds, I expected chaos, texts, calls, sabotage. But my phone was quiet. Jonas was still asleep, curled toward the wall like always. I watched him breathe for a moment, the rhythm grounding me. Today was our wedding day, and despite everything, I felt good. Not flawless or perfect, just peaceful. The venue was a historical greenhouse just outside of Chicago, tucked behind a park that used to be a train depot. The building had iron arches wrapped in vines, long windows fogged with morning condensation, and rows of wildflowers blooming like they'd been planted just for us. By noon, it was transformed. Folding chairs in curved rows. Strings of soft lights above the altar. My art teacher from high school stood near the piano, chatting with one of my friends from the gallery. My mentor from the conservatory hugged the caterer. It didn't look like a Pinterest wedding. It looked like home. In the bridal room, my best friend Nora zipped up the back of my dress, an off-white thing with embroidered leaves I'd fallen in love with at a second-hand boutique. She stepped back, hands on her hips. You look like a woodland queen who pays her bills on time. I laughed. That's exactly the vibe I was going for. Then she got serious. How are you feeling? Really? I hesitated. I thought I'd be more nervous. Or guilty. But honestly, I'm just ready. She gave me that look, equal parts proud and protective. You know, it takes guts to protect your peace. People think boundaries are cruel, but they're not. They're clarity. I nodded. No more waiting for them to see me. Outside, the music began. Nora squeezed my hand and stepped out. I stood alone for a second, staring at my reflection. I looked like someone who had finally let go of trying to fit in. And then it was time. As I walked down the aisle, I saw faces that mattered. My chosen family. People who had clapped when I won little art shows and comforted me when I doubted myself. Jonas stood at the end, eyes bright, hands steady. When I reached him, he whispered, "You made it." "I know," I whispered back. Our vows were quiet and true. He talked about how I taught him to slow down. I told him he was the first person who ever looked at my work, and me, with real eyes. The applause after the kiss felt like sunlight. At the reception, someone played an old jazz record. We danced badly, laughed until our cheeks hurt, and toasted with cheap champagne. The cake was slightly lopsided. The speeches were sweet and awkward. One of the flower arrangements fell off the dessert table. It was perfect. There was no tension in the air, no whispering comparisons, no obligation to perform for anyone's approval. It was all joy. Full, uncomplicated joy. Later, when the music faded and the last guests left, Jonas and I stood in the empty greenhouse holding hands. "I never thought I'd get a day like this," I said. He kissed my forehead. "You made this happen, Lila. You chose it." And he was right. I had finally celebrated a milestone the way I wanted, surrounded by love that saw me, completely and clearly. No apologies. No exceptions. Just peace. 1 week after the wedding, my cousin Ava texted me a screenshot. It was a photo from Elliot's Facebook. A long banquet table, white tablecloths, candles, and a caption that read, "Family Unity Dinner, when blood matters most." The timestamp? The same evening as my wedding. I stared at the screen for a full minute before letting out a short, dry laugh. Jonas looked up from his laptop. "What's funny?" I turned the phone to show him. He read it, then raised both eyebrows. "Wow, that's subtle." "It's so them," I said, smiling without humor. They weren't content not coming. They had to throw their own party. Same night. Just to prove something. He walked over, wrapped his arms around me from behind. They're not hurt. They're mad because they didn't get to control the narrative. I nodded. Exactly. That night, more texts came in. My aunt, who hadn't spoken to me in years, messaged, "You know this rift is breaking Grandma's heart. Call me." An old high school friend who'd always low-key idolized my siblings wrote, "Lila, maybe just talk to them. They're still your family." Even Daniel sent something. "You've made your point. Now let's move on. You were always emotional, but this is excessive." I didn't reply. Instead, I sat with Jonas on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker. I let the messages sit there. No guilt. No second-guessing. "This peace I feel," I told him, "I think it's real." "It is," he said. "They're just trying to yank it back." We clinked our mugs together. Tea for me, whiskey for him. Later that week, Nora forwarded me a group email that had made its way around the extended family. Subject line, "What happened to Lila?" In it, Victor had written some grand statement about estrangement as a symptom of emotional instability. Sandra had chimed in about accountability and how my paranoia had become a wedge. It was carefully worded, performative, and so deeply familiar. "They're rewriting it," I said, scrolling through the paragraphs. "They're making me the villain. You expected anything else?" Jonas said gently, "No, but still." I paused. There was that old ache, like an echo of something I used to carry. But it didn't stay long. I deleted the email, blocked the senders. I wasn't going to re-enter a story they insisted on writing without me. They could perform all they wanted, for each other, for cousins, for colleagues. But not for me. I had already left the audience, and I wasn't coming back. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Jonas was frying eggs in the kitchen, and I was curled up on the couch, sketching the crooked plant we kept forgetting to water. Then came the knock. I peeked through the peephole and froze. "It's her," I said. Jonas wiped his hands on a towel and joined me at the door. "Do you want me to?" "No," I said. "I've got it." I opened the door just enough for her to see me. She stood there in her beige coat, hair pinned back like always, clutching her purse like it held her last ounce of pride. "I thought maybe, after everything, you'd be willing to talk," she said softly. I didn't answer. I didn't step aside. She took a shaky breath. "You've destroyed this family. We haven't spoken to your cousins in weeks. People are asking questions. This wedding stunt of yours. Do you even understand what you've done?" I kept my face calm. "You're here because you're embarrassed, not because you care." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Lila, you will regret this. You think Jonas is going to protect you forever? One day, you'll be old and alone, and you'll wish you hadn't burned every bridge." I felt Jonas step closer behind me, but he didn't say anything. Just stood beside me, steady and silent. "You had years to show me I mattered," I said. "You chose not to. I begged to be included, to be seen. And you shut the door in my face every time. All I'm doing now is closing the same door. Only this time, it's mine to close." Her expression shifted from righteous anger to something close to desperation. She opened her mouth again, but no words came out. I nodded once slow. "Goodbye, Mom." Then I shut the door. No yelling, no tears, just quiet. Jonas turned me gently toward him, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. I didn't reply right away. I was listening, for footsteps retreating, for one last knock. But it never came. Later that afternoon, I opened my phone and began blocking. Every sibling, both parents, every number that had fed me guilt disguised as love. Each tap felt lighter. When I finished, I sat back and exhaled. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The days that followed felt like breathing fresh air after years in a windowless room. I didn't check my phone obsessively anymore. I didn't flinch at doorbells. I didn't brace myself every time I opened email. Jonas and I started a new rhythm, making weekend pancakes that always came out lopsided, arguing playfully about bookshelf order, watching bad documentaries with popcorn and commentary. Our life wasn't flashy, but it was peaceful, honest. Sometimes, I caught myself waiting for a crash, a message, a knock, but it didn't come. Instead, little things filled the space. Sunlight through the windows, the warmth of Jonas's hand as we walked to the corner cafe, texts from friends that ended in "love you." That silence I'd once feared now felt like a gift. The attempts to reach me didn't stop entirely, though. My aunt sent a long-winded email about forgiveness being the pillar of family. A former neighbor forwarded me a photo of the family unity dinner centerpiece, lilies, and a framed quote about loyalty. I blocked them both. One afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "You've broken this family." That was all I needed to see. I didn't check if it was Sandra. I knew it was. I deleted it without finishing the sentence. I reached for the journal I'd started keeping when I was 13. The leather cover was worn now, pages full of sketches and cramped handwriting. My last entry had been the day after our wedding. That night, I opened it one final time. No long reflection. No anger. I just wrote, "I don't need to earn my place anymore." Then I closed it for good. That evening, Jonas was humming in the kitchen, making something that smelled like garlic and butter. I walked over and wrapped my arms around him from behind. "What was that for?" he asked, smiling. "Just felt like it." And I meant it. No deeper reason, no ache behind the hug. Just warmth. Just love. Just the quiet, steady beat of a life that finally belonged to me.